Hello, nature lovers, and welcome to another exciting installment of Environmental Systems and Societies lecture series. Today, it's all about energy in systems, and to know about energy, we have to know about the laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics states that either energy is neither created nor is it destroyed. This means that in an isolated system, which has no energy or matter coming in or going out, the total amount of energy stays constant, 100%. It takes different forms, but if you add all those forms up together, it's the same number. That's what that law means. So the energy can change form while it's there. It can go from sunlight to chemical energy, but it doesn't disappear, and it doesn't just come from nowhere. So here's an example. In our world, sunlight's converted by plants into chemical energy. That's photosynthesis, right? And then that chemical energy is stored in the plant, okay? And then the sugar that's in the plants gets transferred to the organisms that eat the plant. So maybe it's a rabbit or a deer, okay? And then that deer will use the energy they consume that originally came from the sun, and that energy gets turned into mechanical energy, which makes them run from predators or keeps them warm when it's cold. So of all that sunlight that hits the earth, let's look at how much actually gets to the deer. Well, 30% is reflected back to space, just instantly changes to light, converted to space. 50% is converted to heat, which we feel, and 19% is used to power the hydrological cycle, or the water cycle. Helps water evaporate, helps that water move across the planet and rain, and it just keeps going, and it's powered by the sun. Only 1% goes to plants, and of that 1%, only 10% is eaten by the cow, and then 10% of that energy is eaten by us. The rest of this all goes to heat, which we'll talk about in a minute. But as you can see, a teeny tiny amount of the sun's energy actually gets to, say, us. But it's enough to power 7 billion of us, plus everything else. So what's the second law of thermodynamics? Well, this one's a little bit tougher, I think. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy of an isolated system that's not in equilibrium, not in balance, okay, that will degrade over time. The entropy will increase. The system will degrade, but the entropy will increase, okay? And what that really means is every time energy changes form, some of it changes to heat. So if you take this smoking hot ride here, and you think about this energy running, it changes it to mechanical energy. So the gasoline's chemical energy, it transfers into mechanical energy, which actually turns the wheels of the car and helps it go really fast. You know, not me, I would drive sensibly, but you guys, it would just vroom. Well, a lot of the energy from that chemical energy doesn't turn to mechanical energy. It turns to heat, okay, which is entropy. And that heat can be used to cook your veggies, but that's still a lot of energy lost. How much? About 90%. When the energy is transformed into work, some energy is always dissipated as heat. The more efficient the system is, the less. But for us, you got to understand that most of it turns to heat. So this system here is a very ordered system right now. Plants are growing, animals depend on the plants, but that system requires energy input from the sun. Okay, otherwise it wouldn't work. So here's an example. This room down low here is all disordered and crazy, pretty much like my house. And the only way it's going to get from that disordered state to this ordered state of the room above, it's the same room in theory, is by the input of energy, your energy to clean it up. So if you want to clean up my house, come on over. But that energy is required to do that. Otherwise, it's always going to stay disordered. And so when you think about a meadow here, you probably don't think of it as an ordered system, but it is. But it would go to disorder. It would die, which is essentially disorder, if it wasn't for the sun being converted to glucose by the plants, okay? And that's an infusion of energy, which is why we live in an open system, not an isolated system. Let me give you a different kind of an example. So this is the Table Rock Dam. And what happens is the water's way up high here, and it goes to this little kind of angled deal down low, and it turns these turbines. And then these turbines, so that kind of water is called potential energy. As it moves, it's kinetic energy. As that changes into mechanical energy, and the mechanical energy and the turbines down low turn these generators up top. See, the fan is the turbine, and it turns this shaft, which turns the generator up top. And that generator converts to electrical energy. So we're like at our fourth conversion now. That electrical energy comes to your refrigerator and actually gets turned into mechanical energy again. Every one of those conversions, a bunch of it is lost as heat. Okay, every one of those. So by the time we get to your refrigerator, it's nowhere near the amount of energy, useful energy, as we had when the water was sitting in the dam. Okay, most of it has now left the system as heat, and heat is not a very useful energy. It can do some work, but not a lot of work. I mean, sure, it can cook food for us and keep us warm, and that's great and that's useful, but as far as actually performing work, moving things and so forth, well, making s'mores, that's great. But aside from that, it's really not overly efficient. Okay, so what is efficient, or what does efficiency mean? Efficiency is really when you take the amount of work or energy that's produced and divide it by the amount of energy that was put into the system. So sure, heat can do work, but it takes a lot of heat to do that work. Okay, so whereas if you take potential energy, and there's not a lot of potential energy put into it, but it gets a lot of work done by generating a lot of electricity. Okay, if we talk about an ecosystem, we're talking about that it takes this meadow, and the energy that comes into this meadow, only about, remember we talked earlier, only about 1 or 2% of that is turned into chemical energy. And then that plant has some chemical energy. This rabbit eats that chemical energy, and only about 10% of the energy in that plant becomes rabbit. The rest of it's lost as heat. And then the rabbit gets killed by the coyotes, and these coyote pups eat the rabbit, and only about 10% of the energy that's in the rabbit actually becomes coyote matter, if you will. So let's put this in kind of a picture here. The efficiency of a system, we can measure that whole efficiency of it. Okay, we looked at the efficiency of each organism, 10%, 10%, 2%. So if we take the plant, how much energy, sunlight energy is the plant converting? 1 to 2%, that's it. And so that's 0.02. The rabbit will take 10% of the energy the plant has and turn it into rabbit matter, animal matter. So that's 0.1. So 0.02 times 0.1. And then the coyote, when it eats the rabbit, only takes 10% of what was in the rabbit and turns it into coyote. The rest of it's lost as heat. So if you do the math, that ends up being 0.0002% efficiency. Not crazy efficient. Enough for us to live on this planet, but not crazy efficient. Well, I hope that made sense. Read the Prezi too. I think that will help you. And if it doesn't, ask me questions. We'll have a great time talking about this. If it did make sense, have a great day. Peace out, homies.